Hello, coaches. My name is Matt Bartley, longtime assistant coach here in the state of Ohio. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about lessons from an assistant coach and how things in football cycle around and other tips, trying to help you become a more successful assistant coach and maybe even move on to be running your own program someday. My journey is kind of crazy. I got my first job. I was 19 years old, just turning 20, the Springfield North High assistant. I was an assistant freshman coach. There were two of us. Mickey Hannon was the head coach at Springfield North High School at the time, just got the job, needed some staff members, and I found out about it, and I said, why not? He hired me with no experience, and I'm forever grateful for him doing that. His defensive coordinator that year is a guy named Jim Dimitroff. Jim eventually takes over for Mickey in 1994, and that's kind of when Jim moved me up to the varsity staff. Served in about every, I coached the offensive line, coached defensive line, coached linebackers. It was a really great experience getting your feet wet. In 1997, we got relieved of our duties, and then I got hired. I had just graduated college. I was a little slow bloomer in college. I was on that 8-year plan. Most people do 8 years, end up being doctors. I was just end up being a teacher. But in 1998, got hired by another guy who had just taken a job, a guy named Jeff Snyder at Dublin Scioto. He hired me to coach defensive line, coached on the JV level and the varsity level for the defensive line. I was living in the Dayton area at the time, and I was driving back and forth from there to the Columbus area. And about February of 99, I figured out I couldn't do that anymore. It was just killing me. Gas was probably $1.35 a gallon. I was complaining about it then. But so I was driving back and forth, and I found a job a little close to home. Miami Trace had a posting for a coach, and Jeff Conroy, who's just became a Hall of Fame member for the Ohio High School Football Coaches Association. Jeff Conroy hired me to be the offensive coordinator, running back coach. First time being an offensive coordinator. I was running Jeff's offense. Jeff kind of, helped me get a feet wet and, learn how to look at different things and run off tackle. And I can say next, thanks to Jeff, that I can run off tackle about as many ways as there are possible. Old eye offensive guy, but it was really good being around that group. But I'll talk a little bit more about that coaching staff here in a minute. And then in 2003, I had a chance to come back to where I live now, Xenia High School. And they had a job open. Paul Jenny was the head coach at the time. Paul said, hey, all I have right now is the freshman head coach. You're a varsity coach. I understand if you don't want it. And I said, you know what? It's 5 minutes from home, and it'll be kind of nice to have that shortened trip. So my duties here at Xenia I've been the freshman head coach. I've been the linebacker coach, been the defensive coordinator, and I'm now currently the scouting coordinator as well as being the inside linebacker coach. I talked about Paul Jenny hiring me. Ed Minery took over for Paul after Paul left after that year and went to Columbus for one of the jobs up in Columbus. Bob DeLong, who has been a great mentor of mine, took over for Ed, and then I currently work for Trey Smitherman. Now, what's nice about this is each one of these jobs has, a uniqueness to it. So, I went to Springfield North. It's where I graduated from. So I was kind of familiar with that, and it was really nice for me to take in that job because I kind of knew the kids in the area. I knew what the school was like. But then after that, when I went to Dublin Scioto, I thought it was, wow, it's a Columbus suburb school, and it's all these things. And, then I went to a very rural Miami Trace. It's basically all of Fayette County except Washington Courthouse City. And then to end up back in Xenia, which is kind of a combination. It's got a little urban setting in it. It's got some suburban to it, and it's got some rural to it. But I can tell you what this is all. Kids are kids. And the only difference between the kids I had at North and Dublin and Miami Trace and here at Xenia is the zip code they live in. They still have the same issues and the same drama. It doesn't really matter. Now, here's where football starts to get cyclical. And if you hang around long enough, you find out things come back around. From 1992 to 1997, when I was at Springfield North, we were the old school slant and angle 50 defense, and we played zone coverage. We played cover two, the old cover two with a hard corner, and then we played cover three, which with sky and cloud support. Very rarely did you ever see us play man. So, that was, I was cutting my teeth on defense, and I played in a 4-4 in high school, and so I didn't know a whole lot about the 50. And then in 1998, when I went to Dublin, Scioto, we said we were a 3-4, but it was more like a 4-3 over defense with a stand-up defensive end, because that's the principles we were using, were a lot of those kinds of principles. A lot of zone coverage, and it was kind of the first real experience we ever had with like an early pattern read concept. What was nice about that defense is, like, if you played trips to the field, we played cover 8. If we played trips to the boundary, we played cover 4. Now, it wasn't what people call cover 4. It's what we did. But it was just, how we would play things. And then, on third downs, you'd either catch us in cover 7 or cover 9. And it was based on, distance and the formation. So it was really my first real experience of getting pattern read. Now, from 1999 to 2002, when I was at Miami Trace, I was the offensive coordinator, but the defense we ran was a 4-4, but it wasn't the same 4-4 that I had run in high school. That defensive staff was really good. Johnny Enix and Rob Enix, Mike Bernard, Brian Sheets, Elgin Card were the defensive staff. And I tell you what, those guys did about as good of a job as anybody of having kids who maybe were undersized, weren't as athletic, but they could get the kids in the right spots because they ran a multiple front defense. It's my first real experience with somebody running a multiple front defense, but never having to change personnel. They could play a 4-man front, a 5-man front, a 6-man front, and they would have, I would call it now a split defense. They would call 4, and I'm trying to think, 4-8, and they play the 4 side of the defense one way and the 8 on the other side. But like, it was really an experience for me to watch that defense get coached up because it was multiple defenses. But they never had to change personnel to get into it. The 2003, I came back. I came to Xenia, and they were a 4-3, cover 2 and cover 3. They would play. That's what they would do, and they would bring the house. Now, over the years, we morphed into a 4-2. We changed to a 3-5, a 3-3 stack. Then we moved to a true 3-4, and then we finally decided, that wasn't who we were. We went back to a 4-2 defense, and we played split field and pattern read. And, we were playing, man on one side and zone on the other, and it was, stuff that was just starting to come out during that time. And we spent a lot of time with UC. At that time, Pat Narduzzi, who's now the head coach at Pitt, taught us a lot about playing coverages and zone pressures. And it was really a learning experience that time for me of figuring out, what were my true thoughts and processes. And then circling all the way back, I'm back into a 3-4 defense that really has a lot of 50 slant and angle tendencies. We play a little bit more man-to-man with a little bit of zone and some pattern read, but it's just kind of funny how football's cyclical. It's, if you wait around long enough, it'll come back, because people forget how to defend it. And I'll talk about things that more here as I go along. the things I learned about in all of these defenses. First, Jimmys and Joes do matter. You know, you can have the best concepts, but if your Jimmys and Joes aren't better than that other's team, you're going to be fighting uphill. Now, the X's and O's start to matter once the talent is equal. I was lucky enough that first year that I was at Springfield North, we had 2 Division I players. One, C.J. McDavid ended up going to, I think, Miami of Ohio and then Southern Illinois. And then Jabbar Threets was a defensive tackle. He ended up going to, I think it was Garden State or Coffeyville Community College out in Kansas. But then he ended up going, he got set up there because he ended up going to Michigan State. I can tell you what, that defense in 1992 was off the hook because those 2 guys got it going. You had one on the back end, one on the front end. Jabbar ended up playing in the NFL for a while. I know he played with the Jaguars and the Chiefs. So, you know, Jimmys and Joes do matter. You can have the greatest, you know, defense ever, but if your Jimmys and Joes aren't as good or better than theirs, you're going to struggle at times. Second thing, know what your philosophy really is. You know, are you a bend, don't break guy, or are you a pressure guy? Bear Bryant said, I think he said, you either have to play cover or storm the fort. You can't do both. And there's not a right or wrong answer. It's what you believe. It's what you can take advantage of with your personnel. Like I said, those guys at Miami Trace, we constantly had some undersized guys that would just become great players because the defensive coaches could get them in the right spot and get them to do things they could do. You know, there's nothing more frustrating than an offensive center who can't block a 150-pound nose guard because the 150-pound nose guard is just quicker than snot, and the center's already at a disadvantage because he's got one hand between his legs. So, you know, find what your philosophy really is, buy into it, you know, learn about it, and it'll help you out becoming a better coach. What's the best defenses, an even front and odd front? Well, I tell you what, the best defenses have a little bit of all in it. You know, every place I've been where we've had really good defenses, sooner or later, you know, like in 2006, we won the league title here at Xenia. We were a forefront, but there were a lot of times there were 5 guys on that line of scrimmage. So I think the best defenses have a little bit of both in it. Just because, especially with today's offenses, I don't think you can be so, you know, hard-headed and stubborn to think this is what we're doing and we're going to change it. Well, all of a sudden, you know, I was watching a coaching clinic on the buck sweep, and I saw 5 wide receivers. And I'm like, well, you can't play a 4-man front, or you can't stay in a straight 50 defense. You're going to have to come up with something to figure that out. And then the other thing is it's hard to come up with gimmicks for offenses. I've coached in about every offense. I've I-based, wing T, triple, spread. And I will tell you this, the 2 offenses that I've seen cause the most problems for teams are the wing T and option offenses, because it's not something you see a whole lot. And you'll see coaches try to do something that's not something they would normally do. They try to find answers. And what happens is, let's say you're an odd front guy, and then all of a sudden you're going to face the wing T, like, hey, we're going to jump into playing a 40 defense. We're going to cover up the guards. Okay, that's great. But what are going to be your answers? Because that offense has seen about every defense. They know if they line up like this, this is what we're going to do. And, you know, I'll talk about some more of those offenses here in a minute. But, you know, don't come up with a gimmick for certain offenses. Do what you do because you know what your answers are. You know, if all of a sudden somebody's running off tackle against you and they're bringing the backside guard around and they're using that guy as an extra insert, you know what your answer is to get in that spot. So do what you do. Now, what has changed since I started? I'm going to talk about each one of these. Videos changed a lot. Scouting. Offenses, sort of. Practices have changed, recruiting, and then off the field things. So video. Video started off mainly in 1992. We would have VHS tapes. You know, you guys may not even know what a VHS tape is because they've been gone for so long. But, you know, we would still get an occasional 16 millimeter film. If you guys have never seen one of those, you know, it's the old reel-to-reel films. And you hear old coaches talk about how when they'd be watching film, they running it back and forth, that eventually the tape may break. So you had to have a razor blade and some Scotch tape so you could splice it back together and to keep the film going. And it was just kind of a unique media to watch film on. Still kind of fun to watch it every once in a while. And then we were VHS probably for most of my career. And then technology made this huge jump from DVDs to digital tapes to just plain digital. I mean, we filmed today on a SD card. And it was just so funny how technology jumped so quickly. When we filmed, you only filmed game nights. You filmed Friday night. Maybe you'd have a parent film, you know, a freshman game or a JV game, but it wasn't that likely. It was mainly just varsity football getting filmed. Now here at Xenia, with our technology, we film practice every day. We film different sections. We'll film individual. We'll film inside run. We'll film, you know, 7-on-7. And it's kind of nice because it just gives you a chance to maybe show your kids some clips of things that they do well in practice, some things that they're not doing so well. So it's kind of been a huge jump in technology just to get that done. I think it's made us better coaches across the country by filming your practice every day. Varsity, JV, and freshmen are all now filmed, and they're put out there on Huddle. Oh, now scouting. Scouting's huge. It's had a huge change, but there's still a little bit of a cycle in it. When I first started, the only way to scout someone was you had to send someone to scout in person. And what we would do is we would get film still, but you would go and you would trade film with the opposing team. The scouts always took. So if we played Fairborn week 2, we would take our week film 1 with us, trade it with Fairborn, and we'd get their week 1, and then we wouldn't get week 2's film. The only way we got that was you had to sit and watch the game, and you scouted it. And I still have some of my old scout forms, and this is how they're cyclical. I still use those old scout forms every once in a while. I remember sitting and watching film. You know, nobody was allowed to take the VHS tapes home. You had to leave them in the coach's office. So, you know, you used to have to go and watch, you know, your scouting, doing your scouting stuff, doing your breakdown. You'd be in the coach's office a long time on Saturday, a long time on Sunday, and then you'd be ready to go by Monday. I remember, you know, that was early in the career. But then what I would do is, you know, I still, if I get a chance to go see a team live, maybe a team's playing on a Friday night and we played on that Thursday, I'll go that Friday night and I'll watch the team because it's just, you get a feel for the team doing it that way. But I remember, you know, when we first started being able to take VHS tapes home to help break things down a little bit more. I remember sitting in my house with my wife, and she learned how to break down film with me. I would say stuff and she would write it down. And, you know, the best story I can tell about my wife is we were writing something down and I said skinny post, and she goes, "Why is it called a skinny post?" And I said, "Well, that's because, you know, it's just the route." And she goes, "Oh, I thought it was because it was run by a skinnier guy." I still tell that story to everybody today that I get a chance to when we talk about scouting, just because, you know, it just shows you how different people's mind work. But then when we take those those things that we wrote down, and we'd create the cards, and then you would, find all the ones where the tight ends were and things like that. And it's, it was one way that you got to know. And some guys still like doing it that way. There's parts of that I still do, but Huddle has made it so much easier now. I heard somebody talk the other day about the difference between Huddle Assist and self-input, and they like doing all the input data themselves. I'll be honest. I love Huddle Assist. It may be one of the greatest breakthroughs for high schools, for people who don't have those assistant coaches who don't do anything but put in data. Colleges don't need Huddle Assist. They got GAs that do all that stuff. But I will tell you, the amount of data is endless if you find the right stuff. You got to find the right data, because sometimes data is just numbers and you're not using it, or it's mixed up. Finding different ways to break film down is huge. Now, we use Huddle Assist, but I still, even though, all the assistants that I'm with, even though Huddle Assist puts in the data columns we're used to, we all still go back because they do make mistakes. I'm having a conversation with Huddle right now on how they label some of the formations, because it's like, well, just because it looks like this doesn't mean it's really that. And, so it still helps speed up the process, especially now that, in our league, we get 3 games. We get the two previous ones. So like I said, if we played Fairborn week 2, we would get week 2, week 1, plus another film that we would choose. Early in the season, it's hard because sometimes you get scrimmages and it's not really the best quality film, or they're not using down and distance, but it's at least a start. The later we get in the season, the better the film is. So we get to choose. We have to take the last 2 plus any other video we want. So sometimes where that's helpful is if you play someone who has never faced your offense, or if they've only played, spread teams and you're a wing T team, you're going to try to find, I think in that third film for our league, you're going to find somebody that runs an offense similar to you or a defense similar to you, just to kind of help out with the breakdown. I love to talk about scouting. This offseason, I spent a lot of time seeing how different people break down films. I've come up with a couple new ideas. And like I said, anybody wants to talk scouting and how you break down, I'd love to sit down and talk with you, because I tell you what, it's the one thing where I think you can help gain an advantage. Now, offenses. Boy, the cycle continues. When I first started off, we were an I-based offense there at Springfield North. And everybody we faced seemed like they were running power. They were running, just good old-fashioned smash-mouth football. We had the wing T and then the triple option. But there was some passing, and I'll be honest. Mike Schneider, Mike Mock, Ed Bolin, and Jason Neiswanger, who are all high school football coaches, Hall of Fame members, they're kind of pioneered. They're the guys that I've had to face, or that I saw, that were kind of the pioneers of throwing the ball a little bit more than what everybody thought was the normal. And they were kind of the innovators. Mike is now an assistant coach for his son, Lance, at Miamisburg. Mike Mock's a head coach in Missouri. Ed Bolin unfortunately passed away a few years ago, and Jay Neiswanger is a longtime area. He was at Valley View, won a couple state championships. Is now getting back in the game as an assistant at Beaver Creek. But Mike Schneider, I got the chance to coach with, and I tell you what, I was like a kid in a candy store when I'm the defensive coordinator, and Mike's over there helping out our offense here at Xenia, and I was like a kid in a candy store. I'd pick his brain just because I wanted to know what he knew and how he decided where defenses were and where the ball decided to go. Then, a lot of guys went to, the spread offense, basically basketball on grass, and they were chucking it everywhere and trying to get you to spread out. And it was a little bit of a frustrating thing. But then what happens is, if you don't have that quarterback, it's kind of hard to throw that ball. But, you don't want to change your offense. Well, we're going back to wing T. So I think things are coming back. I've seen a lot of teams coming back to the I offense. I know Trotwood there for a while they were in the spread, but they could line up in the I and run the ball at you. Coach Mo Douglas at Springfield, same thing. They could be spread out. They'd have 5 wides and they would come back in. And if they needed to be line up in a pro set and just run ISO at you just straight up. And, it's kind of fun to see that offense come back. But you can still see some spread teams that have option and wing T concepts. I saw another clinic thing where guys were talking about buck sweep out of shotgun. And you don't have to line up. So it's kind of, funny not seeing guys line up in the old wing T set, but they're in spread and you got to defend the spread, but they're still running buck sweep inside on you. So it's funny, football's cyclical, hang around, it'll come back. It's kind of things. One of the other things that's changed, practices. When I played, and I think my first year, we had 3 full weeks of 2-a-day practices. And it was, a real 2-a-day. You went in, you practiced in the morning, you came off the field, you showered, you lifted, you went and had lunch, and then you were back on the field for an afternoon practice, and then you left, did it all the next day. Then you had, 5 acclimation days. Well, just until here recently in Ohio, 5 acclimation days were 4 days, helmets only. 5th day was full pads, no contact, and then you had contact. Well, we've at least got it now down to where it's 2 days of helmets, 2 days helmets to shoulder pads. Your 5th day is still full pads, no contact, and then you have contact. Right now, I think, some schools are anywhere between 18 to 21 days, depending on where school starts. That's the other thing that's changed is schooling changes how football gets handled. A lot of the times, I know one school in my area, they start like August 11th, and their week 1 opponent starts August 28th. So they start actually after the first game. So, there's how do you balance out the fairness in practice, and it's just weird how things happen. The other thing that's changed is limited contact. When we started contact, it was on, and you had full contact every day. Now, you're limited in the number of hours, at least here in Ohio, the number of minutes you can have per day being full contact, and trying to deal with those rules. And it's really a safety issue. And I'll be honest, I think it's made us become better coaches, because now you have to be smart about, like, why do you have to really have full contact, all the time? And, how do you use shields and chest pads, and, how can you get some things taught and, take care of your players? Football's under attack from every angle. Everybody wants to see football, fail and not succeed. And it's a dangerous sport. And, there's been studies put out there that, there's more concussions in girls soccer than there is in football, but nobody talks about girls soccer. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because that's where the money is. Football's where the money is, and people are trying to get that money back. The other thing that's changed about practice is more filming. If I could go back now to 1992 when I first started, knowing what I know now, I would try to figure out a way of filming practice, because there's so much teaching that can be taught off film that you miss in practice. You can only watch so much, but when you have a chance to replay each play a little bit longer, a little bit more, it's a lot easier to make those corrections off film. Recruiting. Oh man. I've been lucky enough to have some Division I athletes get recruited in my coaching career, and kind of watching that process or being part of the process. In 1992, coaches' recommendations, going to some college camps, and game film. That was it. That's how recruiting got done. And now, man, it's all these camps and these combines and stars and social media. You ever want to know, I won't put it out there right now, but I've heard a great story about how those stars get assigned to kids, and who's making those real decisions. So sometimes, it's hard to get the kids to understand that sometimes the stars don't matter. I think I saw a couple of years ago in the NFL draft, the number of 3-star and below kids that were drafted in the first round was greater than the number of 5-star kids. So sometimes those stars don't mean more than some paper. Other than that, it's not a whole lot. But that parents and athletes and all the social media presence out there, it's hard. I will tell you this, a lot of the good coaches still will listen more to the high school coach than they do, these stars and going to these combines, especially the combines that college coaches can't go to. So recruiting's changed a lot. And luckily for me, I've seen the change, and I've talked to enough coaches that, it's a really, really finicky deal at times. Now, on the field, off the field, we're doing more mentoring now than I think I ever did prior. And here at Xenia, we have a pretty good mentoring program going with our football team. We've tried to get it going in some of the other sports. Some coaches take to it, other coaches don't. But, one of the big things we talk about with our football players when we're mentoring them is things other than football, like, hey, how's it going at home? You're going to get to know kids, and I could do a whole talk on our leadership and mentorship program alone. But where we learned our stuff from was a guy named Chris Willards, who's a former Cincinnati area coach. He played at Michigan State, coached at Winton Woods, coached at maybe at Moeller as an assistant. But he worked with a place called Sports Leader, and Chris came up and trained us for 3 years. And I use those principles still today in our mentorship program, which I kind of help lead here a little bit in Xenia for our football team. We also have the ability to still use some of the material Chris gave us, and it helps. He's now the head coach at Bay City Western, I think, in Michigan. It's his old alma mater where he's the head coach now, and Chris and I will still talk, and he's a great coach and an even better human being. His amount of care for kids and coaches is great. He's definitely a lifelong friend once you make a friend with him. So if you ever want to know more about that, feel free to contact me. I'll talk to you about that as well. The number of mental health issues that we see as coaches today, a lot of pressures being placed on kids by parents, by themselves. And, they see themselves as, their performance is who they are. And, you got to tell those kids, what happened on the field today doesn't change who you are as a human being. If you're a good human being and you miss that block, you're still a good human being. It's okay. One of the other things that's changed is, having players over as a group for a dinner at my house. Every Wednesday night, my linebacker group comes over and we eat dinner here at my house, and, we'll talk about different things. They usually end up playing video games. They end up playing, Madden or 2K or something, but it's kind of fun just to watch them interact and not have to talk about football or things like that. Some weeks we do, and I kind of let them lead the discussion, but it's fun. It's a chance to get them to see them outside the house, outside of football, and get a chance to see them, just be normal humans. Actually had a couple former players contact me, say, hey, Coach, when this is all over, this corona is all over, we want to come over, and a group of us want to get together and come have dinner at your house again. And it's the group in 2006 that won our first title there for us as a coaching staff here at Xenia that I was on. But it was, it's just kind of fun to have those memories build up with those guys. Now, how do you want to be a great assistant? You want to be great at it? Here's what I tell you: work the job. This is not a hobby; it's a profession, and you have to be professional about it. One of the things that's probably most frustrating is me as a veteran coach are watching guys just treat it like it's a hobby. Like there are coaches I've seen coach that they don't really start working until Friday night, and they're doing all these crazy things, and it's just not what it is. This, if you're going to coach football, especially, and you want to be good at it, treat it like it's a job. Treat it like it's a profession, not a hobby. And then the other one is coach where you're at, not the next place. I coached with a guy who was constantly on his phone, and it wasn't until after the season that I figured out, well, it's because he was trying to get the next job and he was moving on to the next place. And I'm like, so our kids got the shaft here because you're too worried about where you were going next. Another thing about being a great assistant is be loyal. You got to be loyal to the program, and you got to be loyal to the kids. You have to do what's best for the kids. Maybe not be best for you, but it's got to be what's best for the kids. You have to learn how to disagree with the staff in private. You may not like everything the head coach is doing, and that's fine. There's a time and place for that to be said, but it's never in front of the kids. It's never in front of the public. You got to keep that stuff private, because once people see that stuff happening, it splits it splits the staff up. It splits the kids up. Parents start taking sides, and it becomes really ugly. So be loyal to the program, the kids, be loyal to your head coach. But like I said, you don't have to agree with everything, but just disagree in private. Coach everything. I see a lot of guys now that they want to come in and, hey, I coached Pee Wee football for 4 years. I want to come up and I want to be the offensive coordinator. No, that's not how that works. Learn the ropes. I think one of the things that helped me was I did learn the ropes. I coached JV. I coached freshmen. And then we started playing freshman and JV games together on the same days. I coached both of those. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just a freshman coach, I'm not coming to that game. I loved coaching, and it was a passion of mine. It helps you learn how to coach. There's, nothing more telling about what you know about how to call a game than doing it on a Saturday morning and it all falling apart. That's where I learned how to coach, and I learned strategies and things like that. So if you get a chance, coaching lower levels are not a bad thing. Every once in a while, if I get a chance because we're ahead on scouting or something happens, I'll still go down and I'll coach a JV or freshman game because it's fun. I remember a couple of years ago, we were, so it's 2017, we were playing a JV game at Trotwood, and one of the assistant coaches had something going on, and another one, there was just a myriad of things that went on. So there was just going to be one assistant going to the JV and freshman games. I said, no, you're not. I said, I'll go with you. And we went over and coached, and we had a blast that game. It was a hoot just to go back down and coach. And I think we ended up winning that game at Trotwood. Both the games we ended up winning. So it was kind of a fun day for those guys. The other thing, you want to be a great assistant, do the unpleasant jobs, do the laundry, be the equipment guy, figure out how, take the attendance, whatever the worst jobs are, take them, especially if you want to be a head coach. If you want to be a head coach someday, learn how to do the unpleasant duties on the staff, because it teaches you more about how you want your job done and things like that. More things on how to be a great assistant. Do more than's asked of you. doing the minimum just doesn't cut it. And that's not just for football. That's in any job you do. Don't just do the minimum. If you want to be great at it, then go do the job. The other thing I would tell you is learn how to watch film. The number of young guys I've had to correct, on, well, hey, they always do this in this formation. I'm like, no, they don't. You haven't watched film. You've watched a couple clips, and they did that early in that game, and they only did it in that game. So, sometimes you got to learn how to watch film. Don't be a ball watcher. Learn that, hey, when that right guard's right foot is way back, he's pulling to his outside. And, so that's how you learn to watch film. And, you do your breakdown, and then that's one of the reasons why Huddle Assist has helped us a lot, is Huddle Assist gets that breakdown quicker so we can spend more time trying to find those little bits of information. Next thing, perfect your craft in the offseason. Go to clinics, talk to other coaches. Like I said, I spent a lot of time this offseason talking to coaches about breakdown. Being a defensive coordinator, I'll go and, listen to different defensive topics. Or now that I'm just a linebacker coach, I'll go listen to linebacker topics. But if there's nothing really super exciting, I'll go over and I'll find an offensive topic. Maybe it's an offense that we see, and I'll go listen to that. There's so many ways now that you can learn football compared to the old days. Glazer Clinic online, you get that pass. You can go to any Glazer Clinic in America by buying just the one pass. Coach Bandstra's video series, I've probably watched 5 or 6 of them already, and, it's a great tool. There's tools out there, but you want to you have to spend time at this. If you're going to be great, you have to spend time. There are not many coaches that I don't know that will not spend time with you. Talk to John Puckett from Butler. We play them, and him and I talk defense all the time, just because it's fun to see how he sees things, and he likes to talk about how we do things. So great coaches will share their knowledge because they want the game to grow. And the other thing is, don't be afraid of change. If you can't adapt to changing times, you will not survive. One of the things I said earlier is it's Jimmy's and Joe's, and you got to have a philosophy, and you can't be moving things around. I think there was a time here at Xenia that we did that. We kind of lost. I said we lost our soul. We were a base defense, and a lot of stimulus and attack kind of defense, and that's when we were really good. But then we're like, man, we're kind of small, and we got to change defenses, and we got to become more aggressive. And I think we struggled a little bit then, and we eventually found our way back and got our soul back and started playing a little bit better defense. But you got to be not afraid of change. Now, when I've been places where we were an I offense, and we didn't have a huge tight end, and we didn't have that monster fullback. So we maybe had to look at running the ball, which is still what an I offense does, is, you can still run power today, and you don't have to have a fullback kicking out and a guard wrapping around. There's different ways of getting to that play, and sometimes you're going to make the defense defend the whole field. So don't be afraid of change. One of the things, well, that's the way we've always done it. That doesn't make it right. So sometimes you can't be afraid of change. Guys, I appreciate you hanging around today and listening to this. This is my contact information. My email's up there, my Twitter. I would love to talk ball. If you got something special you think you do, scouting wise, let me know. I'd love to hear it. Love to share how we break things down. And like I said, and it sounds like a shameless plug, but if you can afford Huddle Assist, I would get it, because it's going to allow you to do deeper looks into film. So, coaches, I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.